Hello, friends, and welcome to Chapter 3 of the Dialogues. This one's called The Covenant of the New. This chapter gives us kind of an overview of the new stage that we're moving into as we enter into the dialogues. So, dealing with this whole idea of a covenant, I don't know about you, but when I hear that word, I think of something ancient from the Bible. So, I chose this kind of a manuscript visual to accompany it. It's important for us to look at exactly what are we entering into? What is this covenant that's being asked of me? Because if I just breeze past this and I don't really make a commitment with my own intention, it's not going to have the same kind of impact and the same kind of meaning as is necessary for you to get the full impact of this material. So in verse 1, we're told the covenant of the new is simply our agreement to proceed together on the palm-strewn path of Christ consciousness. So in other words, the covenant of the new is kind of like your agreement to follow this path. You don't really know where it's going, and you don't really know every step of the way what you're going to be doing, but it's an agreement to follow the path that you've already been on toward this Christ consciousness, which is where we're heading. So it's really an agreement to step into your own two shoes as living as the Christ. And, please don't use your mind to apply how that's going to work. We're not even going to go there right now. It's just the idea of, am I willing to make a commitment to follow this? And then in the text he goes into for a while, this is the call you've heard for as long as you can remember, your invitation to return home. This is the thing that has just been pulling you forward all along. Like, this life isn't right somehow. Things aren't lined up somehow. There's something more than this. There's something better than this. That seed, that thing that is within you, which is comparable to that which is in a seed that you plant in the ground. There's something within that seed that just longs to complete itself, to become what its blueprint is. And that's the same call that you have felt probably from day one. It asks you to invest your human life with your true purpose. As a pioneer of the new, and this is how you do it, by denying the old and accepting the new. So this is where the path is taking us. The old strategies that we've used, the old ways of operating, aren't going to cut it as we're following this new path. So we have to deny the things that always worked for us in the past. Worked for us. I say that in quotations because they've only worked to a very limited degree. And accepting the new. So he tells us in verse 5, you have it within your ability to mend the rift of duality. That's no small promise. A state that was necessary for the learning of the separated self, but that is no longer necessary. The mending of the rift of duality will return the world to itself. So many interesting things in this section of the verse. So one, that mutual relationship, if you will, between duality and the separated self. That's really by seeing ourselves as a separate being. It has been essential to live in a world of duality, in a world where I'm over here and you're over there and that's over there. And all of us are separated from each other. That was the essential component to what was referred to as the house of illusion. That whole idea of I'm a separate being is kind of the foundation of that. And it's not necessary anymore. It's just you don't need it, and you're being led out of it. So, this last statement, the mending of the rift of duality will return the world to itself. There are so many things in this course that are hidden, that are like little surprises if you go deeper into them. So, look at the capitalized self as if the world has a self. And it's the same capital S self that's used when it's talking about your capitalized self. As if the world is just another component of the capitalized self. Plant that interesting seed, and we'll talk about that more as we get into the 40 days and 40 nights. But just make note of it, that the world isn't separate from you either. Doesn't mean it's real as you think it is, but it's not separate from the whole self. So, in the way of the old, we learn through contrast. And of course, we've been talking about this since chapter 1, but it certainly is the dynamics of learning as we've known it. Good and evil, right and wrong, weak and strong, love and fear, sickness and health, life and death, polar opposites. That's how the whole world of illusion was constructed. And then we contrast and compare. That's how we learn. I see that that person is good, and I feel good when I'm around them. Therefore, I want to be like them. I'm comparing. Versus that person who's always talking about negative things and doing negative actions, and I don't want to be like them. I want to be like this other one. So we're comparing and contrasting, and we're making decisions and learning according to that process. But we don't have any more use for learning. So we have no more use for contrast. And this is a very well laid down mind pattern that we have used for contrasting things in order to learn. So saying we don't have any more use for it. The kind of learning that we have always thought of as learning is passé now. The way of using our mind to strategize and to come up with techniques and approaches that are going to get us where we want to go is no longer useful. Verse 7, our first action in understanding what we are called together to do is to begin to declassify all the various aspects of life that were needed in the time of learning. We let the old go, and with it, all ideas of contrast and opposites, of conflict and opposing forces. So this really is calling for an end to polarity. And at the time of this recording, we're in a great political unrest situation. And people on both sides of the issue have gone to extreme poles, and there aren't very many people in the middle. And as we move into Christ consciousness, it's really important for us to not choose a side, not be polarized in our points of view and in our speech, because it just reinforces the world of duality and the compare and contrast. And of course, that's really challenging to the one who has built a life and a persona around certain things being good and certain things being bad or not helpful or evil. And so this is what we're being asked to let go of right now. This is no small task. But of course, this isn't the only time you'll be learning about it, but it is being introduced here. So if we don't learn by deciding what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, what do we do? Of course, the time of learning itself has passed, but we are in a time of transition. So we're in a time of growth and expression and expansion. So there's a difference between expansion and learning. And we're told that we now achieve victory through surrender. And of course, this isn't a new concept, but we really need to look at it more deeply. We have this idea in our culture that surrender means giving up. It means there's no hope. It means weakness, passivity. It's not a very exciting concept to the ego at all, or to the personal self. Surrender sounds really wrong to the personal self. But what it's really doing, it's explained here, rather than continuing to contrast and compare, we actively and totally accept what is given. So surrender, what all we're surrendering is our old way of processing, our old thought patterns, our own techniques. And what we're actually doing is accepting. So surrender really means dropping. We're dropping our old way of doing things. And accepting is it's an active verb. It's bringing everything into your embrace. It's making room for everything in your mind and in your heart, and everyone, every situation, every moment, every relationship. This is a really crucial point as we move forward, and we'll come back to it again and again. The new ideas of oneness aren't new at all, but are ideas of who you truly are. What is new is birthing these ideas into the self of form, so that your true self, capital S, and the elevated self of form are working with ideas birthed from the same source. So what this is saying is the true self, your true self, the one self, has never not existed. That's not new. It's the source of everything there. It's the eternal part, the eternal one. But what is new is becoming the elevated self of form, so that you're actually aware of your relationship with the true self, capital S. So now, instead of the higher self being the source of everything and creating all of the drama and the play, and then the personal self, that expression of the self taking a personal identity, having a name, having a form, and playing out this character, unaware that it actually is an expression of the one eternal self. Now, the one who's in form and has a name and is playing a character is aware that it's an expression of the one self, and they can work in tandem. They work in harmony. This is what the wholehearted is about. So this is what's new. The fact that you're becoming aware of who you actually are while still in form. So when he was talking about the new ideas, I thought it might be helpful to go over what these new ideas are. And so I just kind of put these down as a review from the ideas that were presented in the treatises. So the first one is accomplishment. The idea that you're already accomplished. You've never not been accomplished. You've never not been the one self. The idea of giving and receiving is one. We're going to talk about that more specifically in just a little bit, so hang with me on that one. The idea that no relationships are special, since all relationships are the self interacting with the self. All relationships are equal. They're different. They play different roles. The difference between the role I play with myself and my son is different from the roles I play with myself and my neighbor's son. So they're not more special. They're not more valuable. They just are different. in their expression in this particular character's life. There's no loss, but only gain. If everything comes from the same source, how can there be loss if one part of myself receives and it loses something to another part of myself? It's just, there's only gain. It's only enhances the one entirely, no matter what happens. Regardless, everything enriches, enhances, and expresses the one, because there is only one. So nothing can be lost. And we only learn in unity. Again, we're not, this idea of learning. We only grow and expand in unity. That's the only way, only place that real progress happens, is when we recognize, realize, remember who we truly are and what's actually happening here. We exist in relationship and unity. We can't be separate from anyone or anything, no matter how hard we try. Our existence is based there. There's only one consciousness, and it contains everything. And as we know that, and we're aware of that, we know that I can't not exist within that one consciousness. Correction and atonement. So here's another aspect of what we used to think of as learning. I can find out, when I revert to old patterns, I suffer. I can correct that. I can make a choice. And atonement, of course, at one moment, when I feel like I'm separate, when I really am lost in my character and I feel like a separate being, I can change back. I can make the decision to drop my identity with my character and come back into oneness. So back then to verse 20, you will notice that all of these ideas have in common a quality of oneness. Oneness replaces duality or contrast. So really, this is the fundamental concept here. And I mean, to a person, everyone who has what they call an awakening or an enlightenment experience says, I saw that everything was one. I saw that we were all one. Everybody has that same experience when they get a glimpse of what's true. And so we've been playing this game of separation, and of course it's been a wonderful game in many ways, and it's allowed us to have the experience of individuation, and it's allowed the one to come from all kinds of different points of view. And it's been a beautiful, wonderful game. And now we're remembering that it's a game. And we're remembering our oneness. We're remembering the fact that we are an expression of the one. And it replaces separation. So now let's get down. In the text too, it talked about giving and receiving are one. So it said, if we're all one, this idea makes no sense. Well, that's true. If I give to you, but you're me, it's kind of rules itself out. But it does make sense, however, when we recognize that our shared consciousness is occupying multiple forms. I don't think any of us can debate this idea. It's pretty obvious that this one being, this one energy, is occupying multiple forms. And we, in our multiple forms, have multiple points of view. Doesn't take away from the fact that we come from the same source. It just means we're all having a different experience. And why wouldn't the one do that? The one wants to have as many experiences as possible and express in as many ways as possible. So the elevation of self in form requires that giving and receiving as one be shared in form. So once again, we're coming back to the idea that This little game we're playing, this experiment that we're in, is requiring us, well, I don't know if it's requiring, it's available, and we're choosing it, to express and to remember that we are the one self while we are still in form. We're not waiting to die to figure that out. We're doing it while we're here in form. Verse 16. You as the self are the truth. You as the self are the creator and the created. Now this is a bit of a leap, but it is absolutely true. So you are not separate from the one self. It seems like even those who have a belief, like get the idea that I'm part of the same source as everybody else, it needs to happen on a knowing level, I guess. A recognition that there's never been a disconnect from that. There never is a disconnect from the self. And you know this because of the fact that you can always remain aware. You always have a sense of existence, of being, of here I am. And that's the self. That's the higher self. And that's who you actually are, even while you're playing this character in this individuated form. So you are both the creator, that higher self, that sense of being, that energy of creation. You are that sense of here I am, I exist. And you are the created. You are the world of illusion. You are the world of a character. You are all the experience that happens to you. You are all of the things. You are phenomenon, and you are also the source. Verse 18, this is not meant to convey any division between the self and the elevated self of form, but to demonstrate that there is a difference in form between the self and the elevated self of form. So while we are still in the game, there are two things going on. There is a sense of being, the higher self. There is an awareness, a consciousness. And there is the experience of the self of form. So both of these things are going to be going on in tandem while you're here in the game. So you're not learning something new in this. This is not a new thing, like a new belief system that's going to help you make sense of your experience. This is not a new framework of ideology. You are just becoming aware of what is. How do you know that it's not just a new framework, a new ideology? Check yourself and see. Are you conscious? Are you aware? Is there something in you that never goes away, that's been there since you were a baby? That's always been there. That sense of here I am. This is me. I exist. That is the higher self. And there's been the character who's been aware of all the changes, all of the comings and the goings and the point of view that's happening within the life structure that surrounds you. So it's easy to become aware of it. You just have to look to see if it's true. It's not about a thought system. It's about recognizing what's already here. So different expressions do not make different. And this one's a little bit hard to wrap your head around because it feels like we've been at it so long. We have thought patterns that are so firmly entrenched. I mean, I'm having my experience in my environment, in my body, with my people, and you are in your body and having yours from your perspective. We're different, but we're different expressions of the same thing. The patterns of the new will support only life-giving and life-supporting systems, while allowing different expressions. These are your ideas, as well as the ideas of your brothers and sisters and creation itself. And we're talking about the previous ideas when I reviewed the ones from the treatises. There is nothing to be learned, but only remembered. So, how do you remember something? It's different from how you learn something. When you learn something, you take in information or a point of view or ideas, you process it through your mind, you assess whether or not it makes sense to you, and then you find a way to store the information so that you're able to recall it. That's how we learn. But how do you remember? If somebody says to you, remember when you were 6 years old? What do you do in order to find out if you remember or not? You have to shift back inwards. You have to look within and find out if there's a memory there or not. So the same thing is being asked of us now. Shift back in. See if it's true. Test it. Use your own experience to remember what's actually true. And don't trust any other authority than your own experimentation to find out if it's true. Just look with an open mind from a neutral place and ask yourself these questions, and you'll remember, you'll see what's true for you. We end here with verse 23 in this chapter. All, he emphasizes, that you need in order to create the new is available within you. You don't have to get anything from the outside. The power of the universe is given and received constantly in support of creation of the new. So right there, you have so much support. This is what creation is. The entire universe, the all of all, giving and receiving as one. This reciprocal action, like the waves of the ocean, in and out, like breathing in and out. This is our power, and our power is needed for the creation of the covenant of the new in this time of Christ. So our power together, as we come at this with an awareness of our oneness, it's really what this is about, and from a place of accepting whatever is. And it doesn't seem like A and B lead to C, but they do. They do. And you'll find out for yourself, because you're going to be your own authority as you follow this path. Anyway, that is the end of this chapter. I appreciate you joining me, and I look forward to connecting with you again in chapter 4.